This message is brought to you by the Sons of Light, Christian Ministries, and Apologetics, bringing you the most important information. The doctrine that Eve was seduced by the serpent, producing a literal seedline of evil, was not confined to the Celtic Church. As we've seen, even distant and unrelated sources, like the Proto-Evangelium, echo the same core truth: that the fall in Eden was not merely symbolic, but a physical corruption of the bloodline. What's remarkable is that these witnesses come from vastly different corners of the early Christian world: Egypt, Judea, even among pre-Christian Jewish scribes. Yet they arrive at the same understanding, long before Rome obscured it. In this follow-up, we will examine the broader body of ancient evidence, from the Aramaic Targums and the Dead Sea Scrolls, to early church fathers like Tertullian and Irenaeus, and apocryphal texts such as the Gospel of Philip. These testimonies, though scattered across time and geography, bear unified witness to the literal two-seedline doctrine. The serpent's children versus the children of Adam. The enemy has worked hard to erase this truth from the historical and theological record, but the evidence is overwhelming, and it is time to uncover it. The Gospel of Philip, dating to the 3rd century AD, is a collection of sayings, ostensibly about Christ. But what we are interested in here is how the true story of the satanic seduction of Eve got into Egypt in the 3rd century AD, and later also into the Celtic Church. First, adultery came into being, afterward, murder. And he was begotten in adultery, for he was the child of the serpent. So he became a murderer, just like his father, and he killed his brother. Indeed, every act of sexual intercourse which has occurred between those unlike one another is adultery. While universally disregarded, it cannot be denied. Whether we read the Masoretic or Septuagint texts at Genesis chapter 3, verse 15, there are two entities spoken of as having seed. Many, if not most, will identify only one of these two seed, and they will accept her seed and completely ignore thy seed. It is scholastically and intellectually dishonest to imply that there is but one seed spoken of at this verse. And who can thy seed be, other than the children of the serpent, at verse 14, known today as the Canaanite, Edomite Jews? The primary objection to this is the verse found at Genesis chapter 4, verses 1, which states that Cain is the son of Adam. Upon an examination of the Hebrew, it is clear that the text of that verse was corrupted at an early time. This is recognized by a number of witnesses. One such witness is the Interpreter's Bible, a 12-volume collaborative work of 36 consulting editors, plus 124 other contributors, who make the following observation on the verse, referring it to a rendering which is unintelligible, and that the words are a gloss. Likewise, the Interpreter's 1-volume commentary on the Bible, edited by Charles M. Lehman, makes the following comment on the verse, claiming the Hebrew can scarcely be translated, still less understood. The many different Greek interpretations of the verse, which are found in the Hexapla of Origin, also indicate that the verse is corrupt, as do the Aramaic Targums, where there are ancient attempts to reconstruct the meaning of the passage. That evidence is in turn corroborated in apocryphal literature, such as the 4th book of Maccabees and the Proto-Evangelium of James. With all these witnesses, the standard text of Genesis 4:1 may indeed be challenged, and since that passage is the only place in Scripture where it may be perceived that Cain was the son of Adam, it is disqualified as being a reliable witness. Especially in the face of many other witnesses, which are found in the New Testament, which refute the notion. Also including every genealogy found in either the Old or New Testament, where Cain is never listed among the sons of Adam. Reading first from the Aramaic Targum, Pseudo-Jonathan. At Genesis chapter 3, verse 6, which is unique, inasmuch as it identifies Samuel as the angel of death, who is symbolized as the serpent who beguiled Eve. And the woman saw Samuel, the angel of death, and she was afraid, and knew that the tree was good for food, and that it was a remedy for the enlightenment of the eyes, and that the tree was to be desired to make one wise. She took of its fruit and ate, and also gave to her husband, and he ate. And it reads Genesis chapter 4, verse 1, as follows. And Adam knew about his wife Eve, that she had conceived by Samuel, the angel of the Lord, and she became pregnant, and gave birth to Cain. He resembled the upper ones, and not the lower ones. And she said, I have acquired a man from the angel of the Lord. Reading from another rabbinical work, dating back to the 8th century. The serpent came into her, and she became pregnant with Cain, as it says, And the man knew his wife, Eve. What did he know? That she was already pregnant. And she was that his likeness was not of earthly beings, but of the heavenly beings. And she prophesied and said, I have gotten a man from the Lord. Commenting on this book, in his book, The Bible as It Was, by James L. Kugel, wrote the following. If Cain's father was the devil, this would provide another explanation for Eve's cryptic words at the baby's birth. I have gotten a man with the Lord. For if Cain had in fact been engineered by one of God's angels, however wicked that particular angel might have been then, with the Lord could be a shorthand way of saying with an angel of the Lord. Likewise, this divinely begotten child could appropriately be called a man. Thus, some ancient interpreters concluded that Cain had in fact been a half-human, half-angelic creature begotten by the devil. Again, this is corroborated in the book of Maccabees. I was a pure virgin and did not go outside my father's house. I guarded the rib that Eve was built from, nor did the destroyer, the deceitful serpent, defile the purity of my virginity. Tertullian, the 2nd century theologian, of whom we have cited often throughout our body of work, was the first to write in Latin, earning the title, the Father of Latin Christianity. However, his prominence would exceed all of Europe, becoming universally known as the founder of Western theology. Tertullian was an early Christian apologist and a polemicist against heresy, including contemporary Christian Gnosticism. The serpent seedline doctrine, being included among the teachings of some Gnostic sects, would certainly have been admonished by Tertullian if he believed this teaching to be heretical. It is clear from his writings that he was not opposed to the two seedline doctrine, but proclaimed it to be true. Having been made pregnant by the seed of the devil, she brought forth a son. Irenaeus, in his book Against Heresies, refutes sects who glorified Cain, but in doing so, reiterates the understanding that Cain was distinct from Adam's godly line. He speaks of Canaanites as a separate race of evil men, not just spiritual rebels. For when they assert that Cain was the son of Adam and Abel was the son of God, they fail to recognize that Cain was of a different race from Abel, who was the righteous one. Cain and Abel were not simply two spiritual types of men, but two distinct races, which bore differing fruits of nature. The righteousness of Seth and the corruption of Cain were passed on to their descendants. Irenaeus is not merely offering a speculative distinction, but is underscoring the essential theological concept that the line of Cain was inherently corrupt, which was key to understanding human nature and salvation. The doctrine of the two seedlines aligns with the biblical narrative of conflict between the seed of the serpent and the seed of the woman, a theme carried throughout Scripture that speaks to the spiritual and moral division of humanity. Hippolytus, in refutation of all heresies, notes that the doctrine of two races, one evil and one righteous, persisted from the earliest times and was distorted by the Gnostics. The fact that Hippolytus had to argue against a corrupted version implies a purer version already existed in Christian circles. The Gnostics assert that there are two distinct races of human beings, one the children of the serpent, and the other the descendants of the true God. This division between good and evil was present from the beginning, when Cain was marked as the offspring of the serpent. This distinction, made clear from the earliest times, is distorted by those Gnostics who seek to invert the roles of these races. The sons of God are those who were brought forth from the Spirit and the Word, while the sons of the wicked one are those born of the seed of the serpent. This distinction is not merely symbolic, but refers to two separate physical and spiritual families, each with its own inheritance. The early Christian concern with the purity of doctrine and the distinction between good and evil was not limited to abstract or spiritual teachings, but was crucial in understanding human origins, sin, and redemption. Tertullian, Irenaeus, and Hippolytus were fighting against heretical teachings that sought to erase the distinction between these two seedlines, which would have muddied the foundational Christian concepts of righteousness and corruption, as well as the idea of a cosmic struggle between good and evil. Though not a church father, Josephus, the first-century Judean historian, confirms the moral corruption of Cain's lineage in Antiquities of the Judeans, Book 1, Chapter 2, where he writes, "But Cain was not only very wicked in other respects, but was wholly intent upon getting. He only aimed to procure everything that was for his own bodily pleasure. He increased in his wickedness. He was the author of measures and weights. And whereas they lived innocently and generously, while they knew nothing of such arts. He changed the world into cunning craftiness. Josephus presents Cain as the father of corruption, oppression, and worldly power, matching exactly the role of the serpent seed in scriptures and in earlier apocryphal texts. The Dead Sea Scrolls, dated to the 2nd century BC to the 1st century AD, demonstrate that two lineage thinking existed among pre-Christian Israelites. In particular, the War Scroll and Community Rule Scrolls describe a cosmic conflict between the sons of light and the sons of darkness, language identical to that later used by Christ in John chapter 12, verse 36, and by Paul in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 5. The Qumran community believed in a dual creation, the corruption of the temple priesthood, and the coming of a messianic figure to wage war against the serpent's seed. This Qumran dualism supports the idea that the two Seedline worldview existed in Orthodox Yahweh-worshiping communities even before Christ, and was not Gnostic or later invented. As always, thank you for listening. Peace and God guard you forever. Good night.